Now we're going to focus on painting with paints and creating a color wheel. For our second mask, we're going to be really focusing on color and the symbology of color and how can you make that work in your mask. But if you don't understand how to mix the colors and create the colors you need, that could be really difficult. So what you're going to need for this is the paints that came in your kit. You're going to need something to put down to protect your table. I just have this piece of newsprint. Any kind of paper will work. You're going to need your paper that your color wheel is going to be on. I like to use something a little thicker. This is like sketch paper, construction paper. If all you have is just regular notebook paper, that'll be fine. It'll be a little tricky, but you can do it. Scrap paper, anything that you have. It doesn't have to be white. The closer to the white, the better, because some of the colors you'll notice will have a harder time showing up if it's on something darker, like if it were brown like this table. If you have a ruler or some kind of straight edge like a book, that can be helpful. Your paintbrushes, your paint palette, which I'm just using a paper plate. You could use a regular plate. Just make sure when you're done, just wash it really well. I like to use a paper towel to kind of dry my brush off, and a cup of water. So this is just a drinking cup and a bunch of water. Acrylic paints are water-based, so that means that they just wash off and wash out with water. If you took an art class in school, grade school, or anywhere I've painted at any time, most likely it was acrylic paint. Acrylic, tempera, they're all the same water-based plasticized paint. So they mix easy, they dry fast, but they can also get muddy really fast too. All right, so for my color wheel, if you want, it doesn't have to look just like this. There does need to be 12 steps. So this is a 12-step color wheel, or all the colors you're gonna need. So you can Google it, you can make this more creative if you want. I just did something really simple and basic. I have 2 circles here. I traced this bowl. So this is my outer circle, this is my inner circle, nothing fancy. Found the middle point of that circle with my straight edge, and then created 12 sections. And those sections are not exact, and that's okay if they're not. And then I went ahead and just labeled all of the 12 colors, so they're in there. Now there is a specific way that they need to be organized, so we'll start first with the primaries. I think those are the easiest to figure out. So red, blue, and yellow, and they are equally spaced on the color wheel. So there should be 3 colors in between each of those. So let's get started. All right, so let's start with red. I'm gonna grab my red tube here. This is cadmium red. And I always just start off with just a little bit of paint, because you can always add more out or get more out if you need to. If you use too much, you can't put it, or you shouldn't put it back in the tube, because it can contaminate the tube. And now that I've got my paints ready, brushes. So here are the brushes that came with the kit, or some type of brushes. Hopefully you have. And I choose the brush depending on the size of what I'm painting. So this red square is not very big. So this one is out because it's just way too big. And even for my taste, probably this little one's out. I'm going to keep it around for detail. But I'm probably going to start with this one because I feel like I have the most control. Choose whichever brush you want. This is just for those that haven't painted before and need a little bit of guidance. So if you've painted a lot, go for it. I'm going to use, I like to get a little bit of water in my brush just to kind of wet it, especially if it's a brand new brush and you've never used it before. And that's when I take the paper towel to get off the excess water. All right, let's get going. So I'm going to get a little bit of red here on my paintbrush. You don't want to use too much paint at once because it can get really difficult to move the paint around. And this is nice because it's a good exercise in controlling the paint, you know, keeping it inside the lines. You won't have lines, of course, on your mask, but you might want a line. And I'm noticing as I'm painting, there's one little hair. You probably can't see it, but there's actually there's 2 little hairs sticking out that just didn't get trimmed properly. I'm not going to worry about it so much right now, but before I start painting my mask, I'm definitely going to trim those 2 little hairs with scissors. So I'm just going to fill this shape with red. So for the primaries, we have all of those. We have red, yellow, and blue in your kit. So those you won't have to mix at all. See, I'm kind of going slowly over the edge. And then I'm also trying to get rid of these kind of paint streaks that are happening too when I paint. And a lot of times when I'm painting, I'll start inside of my line a little bit and then move slowly and kind of push the paint towards that outer edge. And you'll notice too, I'm always bracing myself because our bodies are constantly moving. Even when we think we're being still, we're not. We're breathing, you know, our bodies are doing the things that they do on the inside. So I'm always kind of holding, in this case, I'm holding down my paper so it doesn't wiggle and move because my table's a little wiggly. And then I'm also bracing my hand on the table. So I'm not painting with my hand up high because I don't have as much control. And then in this too, I'm going to turn my paper a little bit to make it easier. So move your materials to make your job easier. I'm gonna trim those hairs before I do my next square because it's driving me crazy. But this is good. So I can see now before I start painting my mask, I'll have those fibers trimmed and we'll be good. And my hands are braced. I'm working my way around. I'm smoothing out the paint. Like I said, this does dry fairly quickly, and there's a little bit of plastic in the paint. So any texture that you see while you're painting will be in the finished product. So if you don't like the bumps or the texture that's there, just smooth it out with your paintbrush. Get rid of it. Get rid of it now, because you won't be able to get rid of it later once it's dry. Okay, so there's the red. And now I'm done with the red. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stick my brush in the water, swish it around. I like to swish it on the bottom and the sides. That kind of helps break the paint apart. And then it looks pretty good. Eventually the pigments will stain these brushes. Oops, it dripped. I can use my paper towel to soak up that drip. And then I'm also gonna use that paper towel to wipe my brush off. You know you didn't get all the paint off when you're rubbing your paintbrush on your paper towel and it's really pigmented. Eventually the water will get dirty, and so when you rub it, it'll kind of get this brown muddy color, and that's okay. I like to switch my water out occasionally, especially if it gets too dirty, because that can affect your paint color. But I'm getting my brush pretty dry, so there's no water dripping off of that at all. It doesn't even really feel wet. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and paint the yellow and the blue and speed that up, and then when we get to the secondary colors, I'll come back on. So now we have all of our primary colors done. You might notice that, especially with the blue, it's kind of streaky. So when you're painting these or when you're painting your mask, if you're having a hard time and it's getting streaky, you might have to do a second layer, and that's okay, that happens. But, you know, try and get it as solid as you can, because this is our practice. All right, so now we've got the secondary colors. So I'm going to start first with orange. The secondary colors are the colors you get when you mix any two primary colors. And most of you know this, but if not, when you mix red and yellow, you get orange. So I'm going to take some of the red and the yellow that I have here, and I'm just going to use my paintbrush to mix them. Some people you probably see me use a popsicle stick sometime. I've done that. It just depends on my mood and how I want to do this. So in this case, you can see I grabbed way too much red. Look at that. Yeah, that's like super red. It's still really red. Some colors are more intense than others, and you won't need as much. I'm going to keep it though. I'm not going to get rid of it. I'm not going to add more to this because that's a lot, but I have a lot on my brush here. So what I'm going to do instead is grab just another little, like about the amount you would put paint on your, you know, toothbrush, your toothpaste if you're brushing your teeth. I'm just going to take that mixture of red paint that's on my brush here and just add it to that yellow. And that's going to get a little bit better. Always err on the side of not adding enough, because it's easier to add just a tiny bit more than have to add a lot more. So that is pretty close. That's so close. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and I'm just kind of like getting as much paint off my brush, I'm twirling it off as possible. And I'm just going to grab a little bit more of that kind of orangey red color that I had and mix that in. It's not quite, it's so close. There we go. That's looking good. If you need help, you know, refer to the internet, refer to pictures, but we want a really nice bright orange. And I have a lot of paint on my brush. So, and I know I have a lot of paint on my brush. So instead of doing the edges right now, I'm gonna try and get this middle section filled in. And then go back when I have some of this paint off. If you have too much paint on your brush, it's really hard to do detail work. All right, that's pretty good. So now I'm just gonna grab a little bit of paint with the tip of my brush, and now I can go in and do more of these lines. So I didn't mix up a lot of paint because I knew in this case I'm only painting just this small, tiny shape. If you were gonna use some for your mask though, you would probably need to mix up a little bit more. But we're gonna be using paints for all of your masks, maybe this semester. So for sure you'll need paint for your second mask, your inside-outside mask, and then your third mask, your Commedia mask. And your first mask, your found object mask, you might use paint, you might not. So it just depends on what you have, what your base is. Everybody's first mask will be very different, or should be very different. So I did use paint on my example. The one thing to know is that we'll definitely be using white on your Commedia mask, and then other colors. You know, it's hard to guess. So just don't use one whole paint tube, is what I'm saying, on one mask, because you're probably gonna need more colors. So that's a nice like middle orange. So I'm gonna rinse my brush as best I can here. Just swishing it around in the water. It's hard to tell because my cup, but the water is getting very brown. Or yellowy brown. And see how I brushed, there was still, you got quite a bit of pigment there. My brush is not clean enough yet. And you'll notice as you keep painting, that'll start happening more and more often just because your water gets dirty, or maybe you just didn't clean your brush off good enough. And if that happens, the first step is change your water. You know, the step number one, and that should help a little bit. Okay, so we've got that one. Let's move to green. There is a green in your kit. I know we can use it. It's kind of a cool green, but why not? Because, you know, we're having fun here. We can find a green that's a little bit greener. They didn't have any kits with just the primaries in white and black. They all had the green, so we're gonna make that work for us. So I've got my yellow, and again, I'm just gonna add a tiny bit of blue. Blue is pretty powerful. Let's see what we can mix. This might be why they added a green. Some colors are tough to mix. Oh yeah, that's getting super fun muddy. Yeah, that looks gross. Let's not use it. Okay. We tried. So we're gonna cheat and use the green from your kit. Why not, right? We tried to mix it. You see there? That's like a nice If you have kids, you know, if it has kids, it's like a nice green baby poop color. All right, so we're gonna try this nice bright green. That'll be our starting green base. It's a little cool. It's got a little blue in it. I might even take this green and just add a little bit of yellow. Let's see what happens. Hopefully this won't get too muddy and weird. Add a little bit more. Just trying to make it more bright. Oh, there we go. Oh, that's better. Okay, so sometimes you might need to experiment. So what I did is I took the green out of the tube, but I'm just adding a little bit of yellow to it to make it more neutral. Oh, that looks great. We have a winner. Okay, so same thing in the green situation here. Ooh, since I have a lot of paint on my brush, I'm gonna start in the middle, try and work some of that paint out so it'll be a little bit easier to do the edges. And it is a little dark, but you know, we'll make it work. If you wanted to lighten it up a little bit, you could add a little bit of white to it. So, if you've watched the video, you'll know a little bit more about tint and tone, shades, all that good stuff. So a tint is a color plus white. So the best example of that is pink. So pink is a tint of red. So if we wanted to make this a little bit lighter, but not change the color, we would add white to it. And since it's a hair dark, that's something we could do on your mask. Like say you pick green for your Pantalone mask. This is pretty dark. I'm not saying it wouldn't work. Just saying you've got options. You don't have to use a color straight out of the bottle. You know, even in this case, this red is a little orangey to me, but the primaries we can't fix. You have to have the primaries to mix all the other colors. So unless you're gonna go harvest some pigment and make your own paint, you're stuck with the primaries. And you might notice too, if you've painted with other mediums before, so say like watercolor, or if anybody has used oils, all these different types of paint mix very differently. So depending on what pigments there are, what is holding the paint, what type of paint body it has, that can affect how colors mix. It changes. Ta-da! It's kind of hard to tell because it's dark. It keeps raining. It's green. It's a little dark. All right. So now for our last secondary color, violet, otherwise known as purple. Why are you calling it violet? That's a good question. Everybody calls it violet, so I call it violet too. All right, so we've got blue, we've got some red. I'm gonna see if I can use what we have here without getting the yellow in there, because that yellow will throw everything off. So I'm gonna try and scoop that red out. Yay. And then I'm just gonna use a tiny bit of blue. This is the hardest color, in my opinion, to mix. And we're probably gonna need to add some white to this for sure. Because you can tell here too, this is already getting pretty muddy. So I'm gonna put some white in the middle. Just to brighten it up a bit. Still very red, so let's get some more blue in here. We might just have to work at it for a while. It is going to be hard, I can tell you from experience, trying to get a nice bright purple like you would get right out of a bottle. That was a lot of white. Looks like I'm gonna have to get more red out too. And we might just have to get it as close as we can. But this is a good experience too to know for later if you're like, oh, I want purple. Unless you have purple at home, this might be the closest that you get. And it's kind of fun too watching the colors change, like right now. So my purple definitely has more red in it. It's, we would call it a warmer purple because it's got more of a warm color in it. And as I kind of go back and forth and add the blue, then it definitely gets more on the bluer side. So it's getting close. We're just gonna have to deal with the darkness. It's getting right in the middle. So it's got some red, it's got some blue, it also has some white in it. It is not gonna be the prettiest purple you've ever seen, guaranteed, but nonetheless, it will be purple. So it's more blue, some more white. I'm just like barely dipping my brush in the colors. So I'm making small, subtle changes instead of making big, drastic ones. That's close. And see, I think I just got too much blue. Just got really dark really fast. Okay. And I'm kind of twirling my brush. You can see where I haven't mixed all the color. Like I get swirls, so that helps get rid of the swirls on your paintbrush. I think we're gonna call that good. I know it's so dark in here. We're gonna call that our purple, our violet. So get as close to not blue, not red as you can. Because remember, we're gonna need a color on either side of this. My brush has a lot of paint on it, so this is really tricky. I'm gonna try and hit the straighter edges first, and then I can come back and do those corners. Because right now, with the amount of paint that I have on my brush, there's no way I'd be able to make that corner nice and straight. And I'm gonna see if I can get some of this paint off my brush, and then just get paint on the very corner. And if you're finding you have a hard time getting a straight line or getting the detail that you want, you have two options. One, you can clean your brush. The only bad part about that is then you're gonna lose all that paint in the brush. Or, in this case, since I've got, it's mostly covered, I'm gonna go to the smaller brush now. So not only here are we practicing mixing colors, we're also practicing how to control the paint and how to control your brush. Because this is a skill, this takes time. Nobody gets good at painting overnight. I think if you have a lot of things that you like to do with your hands, if you like to draw or knit or crochet or even cook, think that really helps in sort of the dexterity of being able to control this tool, because it really is, it's just another tool. Okay, so I'm gonna clean my brushes, clean them real well. They're really dirty. And now I'm gonna focus on the tertiary colors. So these are all the colors in between the primaries and secondaries. So like red orange, and so that's gonna be red mixed with orange, and then yellow orange. So all the tertiary colors have two color names in them. So red orange, yellow green, blue violet, red violet. And typically, not always, but typically they're written with the primary secondary color name first. So here it's yellow green, not green yellow. And on and on. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna speed this up so that way you guys don't have to watch this whole thing and you can see where I get at the end. So now I'm done with my color wheel. I've painted all the primaries, the secondaries, and the tertiaries. And I actually went through and repainted most of the colors a second time because I found out a trick that with this type of paint, I added just a tiny bit of white to each of my samples, and that made the color a little bit less streaky, a little bit more opaque, less see-through, and it made the colors stand out a little bit more too. So now you can see the difference between, a little bit of the difference between the red, orange a little bit more, the green and the yellow green. The green's not so dark, so the green's like the green from the bottle plus some yellow plus some white, and just experimented. So I pretty much did all of these on the left-hand side once, and then when I got done, it wasn't quite right, so I actually went back through and redid them all. You can see here, it's my gorgeous paint palette, which since it's paper plate, I can just throw it away, or you can use a regular plate. And so now what you need to do is, once this is done, take a photograph in really good light. So either take it outside if it's a nice day, and cloudy, it's perfect. That's the perfect time to shoot outdoors, or in this shade, that'll work so we can get a real accurate representation of the colors. Or, so I work indoors a lot and at night, so I have this really great, if I can get the glare off, it's a lamp with a natural bulb, so it's the same temperature of light as the sun in the shade, so it's a nice white pure light. So either way, get a really good picture so we can accurately see your colors. I'll be looking for the color differentiation. Does it have the 12 steps? And then your painting abilities. So does it look like you did it in 5 minutes, or does it look like you took your time and tried to do a really nice job?